friends. I am back with another from scratch video. Finally, I know it's been a little while, but I'm here with a pretty exciting one. I mentioned on Instagram and Facebook that I've been working with using Axon 2 as a sequencer for bass lines and for melodies, not just for drums. And I wanted to make a little video here to show you how I have that set up in AUM in case that's something you're interested in. Now, for my purposes, I'm just going to be using Model D or Model 15 actually from Moog as the bass line, and I'm going to be using Magellan 2 as the melodic voice. So let's go ahead and go. You can see here that I've got just a blank setting, a blank track set up here so that we can get started from scratch. So the first thing I'm going to do is make some audio and MIDI channels. And I'm going to load in my synths. So for bassline, I'm going to be using Moog Model 15. For melody, I'm going to be using Magellan 2. And then for drums over here, I'll go ahead and throw in just an audio version of Axon 2. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and set up the effects that I had in my preview video just so you can kind of see exactly what I did there. So I'm going to use Bass filter, and I like to do a little bit of a low pass filter on my bass with some resonance in there. I'm going to put in glitch core and Bass reverb. By the way, I have been talking to Alex from Glitch Core, and we're working on setting up an interview with him for this channel here pretty soon. And he's also going to be interviewed by Nutrix coming up as well. So pretty exciting stuff coming up to hear from a great developer, and I'm looking forward to kind of starting a series of interviews with app developers. So if you're an app developer and you'd like to be featured, shoot me an email or a message on YouTube and or my Facebook page, fb.me/LoganJacobMusic, and I'd love to get in touch with you. I'm also going to be working on interviewing some of the performers in the community. We've got some really great ones that post regularly around here, and I'd like to catch up with some of those guys as well as content creators, of course. You know, I just think it'd be a lot of fun to hear from some of those folks and hear their journeys and, you know, how they got to where they are now creating iPad music. Okay, so I've got my synth set up. I'm going to go into Model D, and I'm going to use just a preset for today. I'm going to use the deep sequence bass. Let's double check. Yeah, a little bit hot, but that's okay. Okay, that'll work. And then for Magellan 2, I've already got it set on pluck echo. And I think on the other version, I pulled the octaves down a little bit. Yeah, it's not quite so brassy and high pitched. Now I am also, mostly for the sake of this video, but also for how I record, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, I'm going to send all of these channels into a mix bus so that everything is coming through here. So everything's coming through mix bus A, and now I can control the volume. So I'm going to duck everything down a little bit just so as I'm playing with stuff, you can still hear me talking. Now, normally what I would, well, I'll talk about recording later on, so we won't have to deal with that. Okay, so we've got our regular audio version of Axon 2 set up for drums like we normally would. But how do we set it up to do our bass line and melody? So we're just going to load it in as a MIDI channel. So if you add it in like you would any other audio unit to control MIDI, if you were using Particles or Collider or something like that we all love to use, you can actually load Axon 2 the same way. Okay, now I don't like to have Axon 2 going directly into my synthesizers. I like to run through a couple of things so that I can manipulate it from there. And one of the things I like to go into is a scaler, which allows me to have a little bit more freedom with what's going on in Axon 2. And I know that it'll quantize it into the scale that I'm working in for me without me having to adjust all of the parameters in Axon 2. I'm going to show you why that comes in handy here in just a second. So we're going to load in Scalar. And Scalar is going to receive from each instance of Axon 2. And double checking my channels to make sure I've got things going the right direction. And then send Scalar into each of the synths. Okay, so now when I hit play, what should happen is that anything that's happening in Axon 2 will go through the Scalar and will send into the synth. So I don't have anything, all I'm doing with the scalars right now is just telling it the default, which is C minor. Okay, so I'm just going to hit play and see what happens. We're all used to hearing that noise. If you've messed with Axon 2 at all, you're used to hearing the kind of default noise when everything is just blasting at you in full 16th notes. Okay, so we can make adjustments there. Now, first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get my drums in there. I think I was using the flutter beat preset, but I like to pull it down to the center note of being an 8th note. Just mute those so I can talk to you. Okay, that sounds pretty good. I am going to go ahead and put in my Cosmonaut settings. You guys know that I like to kind of randomize Cosmonaut. Get a nice little multi-tap delay going on there. All right, so that sounds pretty good by itself. Okay, so now we have to do something, and let's do our bass line first. Now we have to do something to make our melody happen. So I actually have a preset made for my bass line here, but I'm going to walk you through how I created it. Right, so if you start from scratch, you have all kinds of options for what you can do. Now, you've got all the normal Axon settings, and most of the stuff like the amp envelope and the pitch envelope and all of that stuff, we're not even going to worry about because it's just sending MIDI data. It's not paying any attention to that anyway. All we really need to pay attention to is the pitch, the threshold, and then the network to get in the sound that we want. So the first thing I'm going to do is adjust pitch 0, and I'm going to make it C2. So that pitch 0 is the root. Now, if I had a hardware MIDI controller hooked up to this, it would make moving those knobs a lot easier, but unfortunately, I'm using my fat thumb, so it takes me a couple of tries sometimes. So what I did to create this bassline generator was that I just went through and picked some notes from, I actually used the C pentatonic scale for bassline. And I tried to keep them all within a couple of octaves, but then I'm going to show you how I had even more fun morphing that around. So let's do B flat. Come on. You see what I mean about my fat thumbs not twiddling these knobs very well. I do wish there was a way I could like double click on it and type in the note that I want or something, but that's okay. Okay, so, and I'm just going to leave the rest of these kind of where they are for now. I'll just for speed's sake. Okay, and then we're going to control our network, and you can just randomly put this in and find sounds that you like. And I'm sure my iPad is shaking all over the place as I'm touching each of these. Should not have connected my GoPro to the same stand that my iPad's on. I'll know that for the future. So I'm just connecting some random networks here. I haven't even adjusted the threshold on any of these yet either. So just kind of trying to make a few lines so that we get something interesting. Now, I don't really know exactly how all of these networks work. I haven't done the deep dive into Axon yet to figure all that stuff out. And I don't know why sometimes it won't let me click on them. If you know that, you can comment down in the bottom and tell me if that's just a glitch that I'm having or what. But you get the idea. So now what I can do is go in and adjust the threshold. So that just basically tells you how many times it's going to trigger that note. So I just kind of go through and randomly put in a few. You don't want them all to be small numbers, or you're just going to end up with a solid set of 16th notes through there. So now when I hit play, I should be getting an actual played bass line from here. And I don't know if this is going to be any good or not. I just did everything randomly. But this is where I started. Okay, so that's not bad. That's not a bad little glitch line there. It might be kind of fun to play with that and see what we can come up with later on. I am going to go ahead and load my preset in that I used as soon as it'll let me click on it. There we go. And I had mine down at the center note being an 8th note for now, and you can add a little bit of interest to it by kicking it up to 16th notes. Obviously, do whatever you want. So let's play that. All right, so that's not bad. So now what I can do is go into my scaler and I can play around with it a little bit. So first off, I'm going to make everything minor pentatonic just in case some extra notes sneak through. And I'm going to raise my output up by an octave. Now something interesting that I found is that you can play around with this semitones knob and get different sounds to happen. So you're transposing it around, but because it's running through the scaler, it's still staying in the correct key for you. So something that you can do is you can put an LFO on that and control the semitones there with the LFO, and you'll get a constant change. So let me show you how to do that. I'm actually going to go ahead and open 2 LFOs because that's what I used in mine. And here's our second LFO. Now, if you are using multiple LFOs, you either need to go through and change the CC values that it's doing or change your MIDI channels. So I just changed the MIDI channels on all of them because I know that it's 13, 15, and 17 for the different LFOs. And for this video, I'm just going to turn all of my LFOs into sample and holds. So the first thing I'm going to do is set an LFO to control the semitones over there. So let's connect. I'm going to go ahead and connect both of these LFOs to MIDI control, and I'll connect the other 2 here in a minute when I get those loaded. And I'm going to go over to MIDI control, and I'm going to go down and find MIDI channel 3 and find scalar, and the pre-transpose button is where I'm going to put on the sample and hold. So I'm going to set that to CC13 because I just know that that's the top LFO. Now I'm going to mute it so you can see it moving before I actually turn it on, so you can see what's happening. So there you can see the semitone slider jumping around with the LFO, and you can set the LFO speed however you want. For this particular one, I want to keep it pretty slow. Now, something I did figure out though is that it is going to dump it down really low occasionally, and it makes it, kind of out of the range of human hearing. It's kind of a sub bass note. So I'm going to bring this value up, and I'm going to bring it up to 60 because I know that I'm going to bring the other ones up to 60 here in a minute anyway. And I'm going to bring this one down to 80 for now. So it kind of keeps it within a decent range. Now, whenever I unmute that, you'll hear the bass line have a little bit more activity as the semitones change, it almost sounds like it's changing chords in there, which I like. I think it's a kind of a fun little way to automate it. And having it a little bit slower there makes it move at more of a kind of regular time. Okay, so that bass line is fine. So let's get some melodic stuff in here. How do we make our melodic stuff work? Well, that's actually even simpler. It actually works the exact same way. You can go through and you can program it yourself, or you can use a preset. I actually started by using the Marimba Accumulate preset because I liked what it was doing. I liked the sound that it had. And I'm going to start it at the 8th note and then go up from there. So let's just see how that sounds. Open up the filter a little bit. And we can actually bring that octave back up. And then we can go through and do the same thing that we did with the LFOs. So I'm going to go ahead and pull in 2 more LFOs, and I'll show you what I'm going to use the other ones for here in a second. And this is going to be MIDI channel 3. This one's going to be MIDI channel 4. I'll set those all to sample and holds. And get both those LFOs in there as well, into the MIDI control. And then I'm going to go to my MIDI control and my MIDI channel 5. Pre-transpose, channel 2, no, 3. So now it's got the same thing going on that the bass line did, where the LFO is controlling how many semitones we get. And I can go in here again and change what values I want. So let's do that 60 to 81. I believe that's 2 octaves between C4 and C6. So you can widen that up if you want. If you want to change your LFO rate, you can. Make it a little faster here. And of course we can kick this up. And then just to really go wild with the melody, we can turn on our glitch core. I do love glitch core. Okay, now if we add our bass line to that, get our drums in there. And we start to get a pretty nice sound going. All right, it's pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and leave that going in the background while I go ahead and kind of talk you through some of the other fun stuff I like to do. So something else that I figured out is that Axon 2 has a million parameters that you can adjust with CC control through AUM, which I absolutely love. The more things that I can adjust, the more I'm going to like an app. I have a big fan of modular synthesizers of the Eurorack system. I'm poor, unfortunately, so I'm working on being able to afford actually building my own case right now, but I've played around with VCV Rack and MiRack quite a bit, and I love that idea of everything being able to control something else. And I like it when there's a lot of parameters that AUM can control, because it allows me to basically treat it as if it were a modular setup. So I'm going to take it even further with what my LFOs are controlling. So in Axon, each of these voices, there's 7 total, 0 through 6. Each of these voices you can control several different parameters of, including the pitch. So what I figured out is that I can set LFOs on those pitches on a sample and hold, so that it's randomly changing the pitches in Axon 2 of the polyrhythmic idea that it's pushing through there. So the first thing I'm going to do is go through and make sure that all of my LFOs are set to sample and hold. And I'm going to speed them up a little bit for this. Nope, I went the wrong way. Speeding up goes higher. It's a higher rate. Okay, so they're still all a little bit different, but they are all sped up. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. You know, I'm not usually a fan of this, my electronic music being this busy, but I do like this sound. I tend to lean more towards slow tempo, ambient style music, but when I was sitting listening to this, it's just really got a cool groove to it. I like it a lot. And you could really have some fun with bringing voices in and out and changing timbres and all of that stuff. You know, even using your LFOs to control the synths and all of that stuff. You could really keep it alive and keep it moving so it doesn't get stagnant. And that's also something that changing these pitches is going to do. Okay, so I've got all of my LFOs set up, and I've got channel 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the various LFOs. So my Axon 2 that's controlling my bass line is going to be controlled by MIDI channel 1 and MIDI channel 2. So I'm going to go to MIDI control, and I'm going to go to channel 3 here, track 3 I guess I should say, and I'm going to go up to Axon 2 and look at the parameter list. It is insane. So when you're using the drums, you've got all kinds of stuff that you can patch together and find cool ways to control and let it adjust things. I've only really skimmed the surface of that because I've been able to find the sounds that I like for my music pretty easily and pretty quickly, but there's just so much cool stuff you can do. So we're just going to focus on pitch right now. Now I'm going to leave the fundamental, I'm going to leave voice 0 the same for all of them. And part of that is because I'm using Rosetta LFO. I know there's other options out there. There's one that has 4 LFOs a piece, but I like Rosetta. I already have it, so I don't want to have to pay for another LFO. And Rosetta gives us 6 LFOs in each instance, so or 3 LFOs in each instance, and I've got 2 instances pull up. So for voice 1's pitch, I'm going to set that. I'm actually going to have that controlled by the same LFO that's controlling the scalar. And you'll see maybe oh yeah, voice 1. That's what so you'll see when I click on voice 1 that it starts bouncing around. Now you'll notice that it is triggering notes outside of the C minor pentatonic scale, which is what I have my bass line set to, but because I'm running through the scalar, it's fixing it for me. It's automatically moving it into key as I need it to. All right, so I'm just going to do the same thing for each of the other voices. So we'll go to voice 2, and I'm going to have it controlled by the second LFO, which is on CC15. I'm going to have voice 3 controlled by CC17. I'm going to have voice 4 controlled by MIDI channel 2, 13. And you can kind of hear it starting to go a little bit wild there, and I'm going to tell you how to fix it here in just a second. So voice 5 is channel 2, CC15. And then voice 6 is channel 2, voice 17. So that sets all of my bass being controlled by the LFO, and you can see all those pitches going wild in there. Now you'll also notice that some of the pitches are way out of the range. They're super high, they're coming in even higher than our melody. I don't particularly like that. If you like it, that's fine. So what I did is I just went through and set a min and a max on all of my LFOs. So probably a little more control than some of you guys like to put in there. So again, 60 to 81 is a good 2-octave range. So it's not dropping down too low. It's not jumping up too high. And it does take a little bit of time to go through each of them, but it's 100% worth it for the results that you get out of it. Sometimes it gets stuck on a note like you can hear there. There we go. Now that should keep it all within kind of a reasonable range that I can then just have my scaler controlling the octave of. You can go to quantize down if you want, doesn't really matter. You can have it just reject notes that aren't in the scale. You'll hear less notes that way, but whatever you want to do. You can take it up another octave. There we go. I'm just going to leave it at 12. That's kind of giving me the sound that I'm going for anyway. And if you don't like that sound, you can play around with it a little bit. I do like the chorus bass. Clean bass sound, but you know, mess with it as you want to. If I were going to make this my own song, I'd spend a little bit of time here. Now I'm going to do the same thing that I just did to my bass line to my melody, and I'll leave that on so you can hear how it starts to adjust it. So I've already fixed all my LFOs, so I'm going to go to MIDI control. I'm going to go to MIDI 5 and to Axon 2, and again just a million parameters there to explore at a later date. So LFO MIDI channel 3, oops, fat fingers. Being a bass player, going from moving over to iPad means that my big fat bass player fingers are all over the place there. You can already hear how it started to affect it just from pitch 1. Voice 3 pitch, we're going to set to 17. And you can hear again the octaves kind of going nuts. We're going to set the minimum and maximum again here in just a second. Now, if you already know how to do your setup, then, you know, feel free to mute it while you're doing that. I like to listen to how it's affecting it. You know, you may find happy accidents in there that way. Okay. So all that's set now. Now let's get these all into reasonable range. Going 60 to 81. Again, that's C4 to C5, or C6, I mean. Which just, you know, it's just keeping it. I'm actually going to change the octaves overall. It's just keeping it within a 2-octave range. I just happen to have those numbers memorized. See, I started playing bass notes there, and I don't want that. I don't want that for my melody voice. There we go. Now, if you want to take your scaler and play around with it a little bit, take it up an octave and see if you like it better in that range. And of course, you can play around with your resonance and your cutoff filter and everything however you want to. Something that I did when I was just messing around with it was I took it back down to eighth notes and I set it to hold and to do an arpeggio. And that's just really nice. So there you go. Now you've got just a cool little groove that you can play around with. You can experiment with different beats. That's a cool one. I like that one a lot. By the way, you may have noticed that on my glitchcore tracks, I changed the what the automatic button is. I tend to mostly stick with the sequence. I don't actually do manual glitches, so I turned that manual button off so that I can just turn on the sequences as I want to start glitching it out. So I can just go through and get everything glitching. And you can just let that groove. All right, so that's one way to play around with Axon 2. Of course, you're completely open on whatever melodic ideas you want to put in there, how you want to set up the network, but it's just an interesting way to use Axon 2 for something other than maybe what the app developer intended, or what most people use it for. I think most people use it as a drum sequencer, but I found it kind of fun to program in some melodic and bass line ideas in there. So now I would be inclined to dump this down to like 86. Let it be kind of a slower groove there. But that's just my personal taste. Do whatever you want. Have a lot of fun with it. That's the big thing. Keep making music. I know this is kind of a tough time for everybody stuck at home, but one of the things that I one of the positive things that I've seen come out of this is there's so many people out there making music and creating content, and I absolutely love it. I love to see all the cool stuff that you guys do. I've subscribed to a lot of different channels. I follow the Facebook pages, and I love to check out the stuff that you guys are doing. So keep it up, keep putting stuff on there. And again, if you're interested in doing an interview on the show through Skype or Facebook or Zoom or whatever you want to use, I'd love to do that. We can just kind of hang out and chat a little bit and share some music and post it on, the Facebooks and the YouTubes and all that stuff later on. Thank you guys for checking this one out. Please like and subscribe. Help get the video out there to other people. Share it with your friends. If there's a group that I'm not a part of and you think that they would appreciate it, feel free to throw it in there. As always, thanks for checking stuff out, and we'll see you next time.